The dust had barely settled on Maggie Turner's father's grave when the bank came calling, and now she stood at the old stone well behind the ranch house, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul. The late afternoon sun beat down on Centralia, Washington Territory, in the summer of 1882, turning the landscape golden and harsh, and Maggie felt as dried up inside as the earth beneath her boots. She had lost everything in the span of 3 months, her mother to pneumonia in April, her father to a riding accident in June, and now the bank threatened to take the only home she had ever known. At 22 years old, she felt ancient with grief, her hands gripping the rough stone edge of the well as if it were the only solid thing left in a world that had turned to quicksand beneath her feet. She did not hear the horse approach, did not notice the tall figure dismounting until a shadow fell across her, blocking the harsh sunlight. Maggie looked up through tear-blurred eyes to see a cowboy standing there, hat in hand, his face lined with concern. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water in winter, clear and steady. His clothes were dusty from the trail, his boots worn but well-maintained, and something in his bearing suggested a man who knew hard work and honest living. "Madam," he said quietly, his voice rough but gentle, "I did not mean to intrude, but I saw you from the road and thought you might need help." Maggie tried to speak, but her throat was too tight with unshed tears. She turned away, ashamed to be seen in such a state by a stranger, her hands rising to cover her face. The cowboy stood there for a long moment, and then she heard the creak of the well's wooden handle, the splash of the bucket hitting water far below. The familiar sound was oddly comforting, a reminder of normal life, of simple tasks that continued regardless of grief or loss. The bucket came up full and dripping, and the cowboy set it on the well's edge. She heard him pull something from his saddlebag, heard his boots scrape against the ground as he approached. When she felt the gentle touch of his hand on her shoulder, she flinched but did not pull away. "May I?" he asked, his voice barely above a murmur. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and then she felt the cool dampness of a cloth against her face. He had soaked his bandana in the well water, and now he was washing away her tears with a touch so gentle it made her want to cry all over again. The water was cold and clean, drawn from deep in the earth where the spring never failed, and it shocked her back into herself, made her aware of the world beyond her grief. "There now," he said softly, continuing to wipe her face with the same careful attention a mother might give a child. "That is better. The water here is good and pure. My name is Ben Wallace, and I am just passing through on my way north, but I could not ride past a lady in distress." Maggie finally found her voice, though it came out hoarse and broken. "I am sorry you had to see me like this. I am Maggie Turner, and this is my family's ranch. Or it was. The bank says I have until the end of August to pay what my father owed, and I do not have anywhere near enough money." Benjamin stepped back, giving her space, but his eyes remained kind. He dipped the bandana in the bucket again and wrung it out, then handed it to her so she could finish cleaning her face. "How much do you owe?" he asked, his tone matter-of-fact rather than pitying, which she appreciated. $300, she said, the number feeling like a millstone around her neck. "It might as well be 3,000. I have $40 saved, and the cattle we have left might bring in another 50 if I am lucky. My father mortgaged everything to buy breeding stock 2 years ago, but then the winter was hard and we lost half the herd. He was trying to rebuild when he died." Benjamin was quiet for a moment, his gaze traveling over the ranch, taking in the neat barn, the well-maintained fences, the garden that showed signs of careful tending. "You have been keeping this place up yourself?" he asked. "Since my mother died," Maggie confirmed. "My father taught me ranch work from the time I could walk. I can rope and brand as well as any man, can break a horse and deliver a calf. But I cannot conjure money out of thin air, and the bank does not care how hard I work." "Banks rarely do," Benjamin said, a hint of bitterness in his voice that suggested he spoke from experience. He looked at her directly then, and she saw something shift in his expression, a decision being made. "I was heading north to look for work, but I am good with cattle and horses. If you would have me, I could stay on for a while, help you get ready for the cattle drive to market. With two of us working, we might be able to round up more of your stock, get them in good condition to sell. It would not solve everything, but it might help." Maggie stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "I could not pay you much," she said honestly. "Room and board and maybe a small wage after we sell the cattle if there is anything left over." "Room and board is more than I have right now," Benjamin said with a slight smile that softened the hard lines of his face. "And I would rather work for my keep than take charity. Besides, it does not sit right with me to ride away and leave you trying to manage all this alone." There was something in his eyes when he said this, a shadow of old pain that made Maggie wonder what had brought him to this crossroads, what had put that look of understanding loss in his face. But she was too grateful and too desperate to question her good fortune. "Then I accept your offer, Mr. Wallace, and I thank you more than I can say. Benjamin," he corrected gently. "If we are going to be working together, we might as well dispense with the formalities. And I promise you, Maggie, we will do everything we can to save your ranch." The way he said her name, with such simple respect and warmth, made something tight in her chest loosen just a little. For the first time since her father's death, she felt a small flicker of hope, fragile as a candle flame but real nonetheless. She looked at this stranger who had stopped to help her, who had literally washed away her tears with water from her own well, and felt that perhaps she was not entirely alone after all. Benjamin retrieved his horse, a sturdy bay gelding with intelligent eyes, and Maggie showed him to the small bunkhouse behind the main barn. It had not been used since their last hired hand left 2 years ago, but she had kept it clean and the roof was sound. While Benjamin settled his horse in the barn and unpacked his meager belongings, Maggie went to the house to start supper, her mind already racing with plans and possibilities. That evening they sat at the kitchen table, the lamp casting warm light over the plates of beans and cornbread, and discussed strategy. Benjamin had a notebook and a stub of pencil, and he wrote down everything Maggie told him about the ranch, the number of cattle she thought were still on their land, the state of the fences, the water sources. He asked good questions, practical ones that showed he knew cattle ranching, and Maggie found herself relaxing in his presence, the terrible isolation of the past weeks easing under the comfort of having another person to share the burden. "We will need to ride the property lines tomorrow," Benjamin said, studying his notes. "See exactly what we are working with. Then we can plan out how to gather the cattle. How much land do you have?" 600 acres, Maggie said. "It is not enormous, but it is good grazing land with plenty of water. My grandfather homesteaded here in 1852, when Washington was still part of Oregon Territory. He chose well. The problem is not the land itself, but the debt my father took on trying to expand too fast." Benjamin nodded, understanding in his eyes. That is a common enough story, especially after a hard winter. But 600 acres is a good size, and if the land is as good as you say, we have something to work with. The market in Seattle is strong right now, and if we can get your cattle there in good condition, we should get a fair price. Seattle is a 4-day drive from here, Maggie said. I have never driven cattle that far alone." "You will not be alone," Benjamin reminded her, and the simple certainty in his voice warmed her more than the coffee in her cup. They talked until the lamp oil ran low, and when Benjamin finally stood to leave, he paused at the door. "Maggie," he said, "I want you to know that I meant what I said. I will do everything in my power to help you keep this place. I know what it is like to lose a home, and I would not wish that on anyone." "What happened to yours?" Maggie asked before she could stop herself, then immediately regretted the question when she saw the pain flicker across his face. "I am sorry, that was too personal." "No," Benjamin said slowly, "it is all right. If we are going to work together, you should know. I had a small ranch in Montana Territory, nothing grand, but it was mine. 3 years ago, a group of cattle thieves came through. My younger brother, Thomas, tried to stop them. He was only 19. They killed him and burned the ranch buildings. I hunted them down and brought them to justice, but by the time the law dealt with them, I had nothing left worth going back to. I have been drifting since then, working where I could, never staying anywhere long. I suppose I have been running from the memories." Maggie's heart ached for him. "I am so sorry, Benjamin. That must have been terrible." "It was," he admitted, "but it taught me something about what matters. Your ranch, it is not just land and cattle. It is your family's legacy, your history. That is worth fighting for. And maybe by helping you save it, I can make some kind of peace with what I lost." After he left, Maggie sat alone in the kitchen for a long time, thinking about this man who had appeared in her darkest hour like something out of a story. She did not believe in Providence exactly, but she could not shake the feeling that Benjamin Wallace had been meant to stop at her well today, that somehow their paths were supposed to cross. She thought about his gentle hands washing away her tears, the kindness in his eyes, the strength in his voice when he promised to help her. For the first time in months, she went to bed without crying herself to sleep. They rode out at dawn the next morning, the air still cool with the memory of night, the grass heavy with dew. Benjamin sat his horse with the easy grace of a man born to the saddle, and Maggie found herself watching him more than she probably should, noting the way he scanned the horizon, the alertness in his posture that suggested a man always aware of his surroundings. He caught her looking once and smiled, a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the strengthening sun. The ranch was more overgrown than Maggie had realized, the fences in worse repair than she had been able to see from closer in. Benjamin made notes of everything, his face thoughtful but not discouraging. They found small groups of cattle scattered across the property, looking reasonably healthy despite the lack of close supervision. By Benjamin's count, Maggie had about 60 head still on her land, which was better than she had feared. "With proper care and another month of good grazing, these will bring a decent price," Benjamin said as they watched a small herd drinking from a creek. "We need to gather them, get them used to being handled again, check them over for any health issues. It will be hard work, but it is doable." "I am not afraid of hard work," Maggie said. "I can see that," Benjamin replied, respect clear in his voice. "Your father taught you well." They rode for hours, mapping out the property, and as they did, they talked. Maggie found herself telling Benjamin about her childhood, about her parents and the ranch, about her dreams of keeping it going, maybe even expanding it someday. Benjamin listened with genuine interest, asking questions, sharing his own memories of growing up on a small farm in Ohio before heading west as a young man. There was an ease between them that surprised Maggie, as if they had known each other far longer than a single day. When they stopped for lunch by a clear stream, Benjamin showed her how to tie a particular kind of knot he had learned from an old Mexican vaquero. one that would hold fast but release cleanly when needed. His hands brushed hers as he guided her through the motions, and Maggie felt a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with rope work. She glanced up to find Benjamin looking at her, and for a moment, the air between them seemed charged with something neither was quite ready to name. "You learn fast," Benjamin said, his voice slightly rougher than before. "Good teacher," Maggie replied, and was rewarded with another of those smiles that made her heart skip. They spent the rest of the day riding fence lines, and Benjamin showed Maggie where repairs were most urgently needed. That evening, after supper, they worked together mending tack in the barn, the comfortable silence broken only by the sounds of their work and the occasional comment. Maggie found herself studying Benjamin's profile in the lamplight, the strong line of his jaw, the concentration in his eyes as he worked. There was something deeply attractive about a man who knew his trade and did it well, who did not need to boast or show off, but simply did what needed doing. "You are staring," Benjamin said without looking up, but there was amusement in his voice. "Sorry," Maggie said, flustered. "I was just thinking how lucky I was that you came along when you did." Benjamin did look up then, his expression serious. "I think maybe we both got lucky," he said quietly. "I have been drifting for a long time, Maggie. It feels good to have a purpose again, a reason to stay somewhere." The air between them seemed to thicken, and Maggie found she could not look away from his eyes. "How long will you stay?" she asked, and was surprised by how much the answer mattered to her. "As long as you need me," Benjamin said. "As long as you want me to." It was not quite a declaration, but it felt like a promise, and Maggie held it close to her heart as they finished their work and parted for the night. The days fell into a rhythm. They rose early and worked until dark, riding out to check the cattle, mending fences, making repairs to the barn and outbuildings. Benjamin was tireless, but he was also careful never to push Maggie beyond her limits, always aware of her as a partner rather than a subordinate. They worked well together, anticipating each other's needs, falling into patterns of cooperation that felt natural and right. As the days passed, Maggie found herself noticing small things about Benjamin. The way he always made sure she had the easier task if there was a choice. The way he hummed while he worked, old songs she half remembered from her childhood. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not watching, with an expression that made her breath catch. And she noticed the way he had begun to smile more, the shadows lifting from his eyes, as if the ranch and the work and maybe she herself were healing something broken in him. 2 weeks after Benjamin's arrival, they were working together to round up a particularly stubborn group of cattle in the north pasture. It was hot work, the sun beating down mercilessly, and Maggie's horse was getting tired. She was trying to head off a young steer when her mount stumbled in a prairie dog hole, and Maggie found herself flying through the air, the ground rushing up to meet her with alarming speed. She hit hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs, and for a moment she could do nothing but lie there stunned. Then Benjamin was there, dropping from his horse and running to her, his face pale with fear. "Maggie, are you hurt? Can you move?" His hands were on her shoulders, gentle but urgent, and she could hear real terror in his voice. "I am all right," she managed to gasp out, though her ribs ached and her shoulder throbbed. "Just had the wind knocked out of me." Benjamin's hands moved over her carefully, checking for broken bones with a competence that suggested he had done this before. When he was satisfied that nothing was seriously damaged, he sat back on his heels, his face still pale. "You scared 10 years off my life," he said roughly. "I thought you might have broken your neck." "It takes more than a little tumble to break me," Maggie said, trying to make light of it, but Benjamin was not smiling. "I could not bear it if something happened to you," he said, the words seeming to come from somewhere deep inside him, unplanned and raw. These past 2 weeks, working with you, being here, it has meant more to me than I can say. You mean more to me than I can say. Maggie stared at him, her heart suddenly pounding harder than the fall had made it. "Benjamin," she whispered, and saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear of rejection. "I know it is too soon," he said quickly. "I know you are still grieving your parents, and I do not want to take advantage or presume anything. But I had to tell you. When I saw you falling, all I could think was that I had finally found something worth holding on to, and I might lose it before I even had a chance to tell you how I feel." Maggie reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. "It is not too soon," she said softly. "I have been feeling the same way, but I was afraid to say anything. Afraid you would think I was just grateful or desperate or trying to trap you into staying." "Maggie." Benjamin caught her hand and pressed it to his cheek, his eyes closing briefly. "You could never trap me. I am here because I want to be, because from the moment I saw you at that well, something in me recognized something in you. I know it sounds foolish and fanciful, but it is the truth." "It does not sound foolish," Maggie said. "It sounds like how I have been feeling and could not find words for." Benjamin opened his eyes and looked at her with such intensity that she felt it like a physical touch. "I am falling in love with you, Maggie Turner. I think I started falling the moment I washed away your tears." "I am falling in love with you too," Maggie whispered. And then Benjamin was kissing her, carefully because of her fall but with a passion that left no doubt of his feelings. Maggie kissed him back, her hand sliding up to tangle in his hair, tasting dust and salt and something essentially him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Benjamin rested his forehead against hers. "I should have asked permission before I did that," he said. "Consider it granted," Maggie replied, making him laugh, the sound joyful and free. They stayed there for a long moment, holding each other, and Maggie felt something in her heart that had been frozen since her parents' deaths began to thaw. She had thought she would face the rest of her life alone, had steeled herself for solitude and struggle. Instead, she had found this man, this good, kind, strong man who had stopped to help a stranger and stayed to give her his heart. "We should get back to work," Benjamin said eventually, though he sounded reluctant. "But tonight after supper, will you sit with me a while? I want to court you properly, Maggie, do this right." "I would like that," Maggie said, and the smile he gave her was worth more than all the gold in California. They finished rounding up the cattle, working together with a new awareness, and every time their eyes met, Maggie felt a flutter of joy. Her horse had not been seriously injured, just shaken, and they rode back to the ranch with the recovered cattle ahead of them. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, and Maggie thought she had never seen anything more beautiful, except perhaps for the man riding beside her. That evening, after the chores were done and supper eaten, they sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the stars come out. Benjamin had brought his guitar from the bunkhouse, and he played softly, old ballads and love songs, his voice rough but true. Maggie leaned against the porch post and listened, feeling a contentment she had not known in months, maybe years. "Where did you learn to play?" she asked when he paused between songs. "My mother taught me," Benjamin said. "She said every home should have music in it. After she died when I was 15, I kept playing because it made me feel close to her. It was one of the few things I managed to save from the ranch fire." "Play me her favorite song," Maggie requested. Benjamin nodded and began to play a sweet, melancholy melody, singing words about lost love and faithful hearts. When he finished, his eyes were bright with unshed tears, and Maggie moved to sit beside him, taking his hand in hers. "She would be proud of the man you became," Maggie said. "I am sure of it." "I hope so," Benjamin said. I lost my way for a while after Thomas died. I was so angry, so focused on revenge that I forgot how to live. But you, Maggie, you are reminding me. You are showing me that there is still good in the world, still things worth fighting for and building. We are reminding each other, Maggie corrected. I was drowning in grief before you came. You gave me hope again, gave me a reason to keep going. They sat together until late, talking about everything and nothing, sharing dreams and fears, building the foundation of something real and lasting. When Benjamin finally walked back to the bunkhouse, he kissed Maggie goodnight with a tenderness that made her knees weak, and she floated into the house feeling like she had been given a gift beyond price. The next weeks were the happiest Maggie could remember. She and Benjamin worked side by side during the days, their partnership seamless and strong, and in the evenings they courted with a sweetness that made the hard work bearable. Benjamin brought her wildflowers he found on the range, and Maggie baked him apple pie from her mother's recipe. They stole kisses in the barn and held hands while watching the sunset, building their relationship moment by moment, conversation by conversation. But the calendar was relentless, and the end of August drew closer. Despite their best efforts, they had managed to gather only 55 head of cattle in good enough condition to drive to market. Benjamin estimated they might bring $200 if they were lucky, which with Maggie's savings would still leave them nearly $60 short. The knowledge hung over them like a storm cloud, threatening their newfound happiness. We could try to borrow the difference, Benjamin suggested one evening as they went over the figures again. Maybe from someone in town who knows you and your family. My father tried that before he died, Maggie said tiredly. No one has that kind of money to lend, not to someone who is already in debt. The bank has made sure everyone knows I am a bad risk. Benjamin's jaw tightened. That banker, Henderson, he has been trying to get this property for years, has he not? How did you know? Maggie asked, surprised. I heard talk in town when I went for supplies last week, Benjamin said. Apparently he has plans to subdivide it, sell it off in lots to settlers coming in on the railroad. He stands to make a fortune. And I stand to lose everything, Maggie said bitterly. Sometimes I wonder if I should just give up, take what little I can get and move on. No. Benjamin's voice was fierce and he grabbed her hands. Maggie, you cannot give up. We will find a way. I promise you we will find a way. But as the days passed and their options dwindled, that promise began to feel hollow. They drove the cattle to Seattle, both of them exhausted from the long push, and sold them for exactly what Benjamin had predicted, $212. With Maggie's savings, they had $252, still $48 short of what the bank demanded. They rode back to Centralia in near silence, both too discouraged to talk much. They had tried so hard, worked until they dropped every day, and it still was not enough. The bank deadline was in 3 days, and they had no idea where to find the money they needed. It was Benjamin who finally broke the silence as they approached the ranch. I have some money saved, he said quietly, about $30. It is yours if you need it. Maggie looked at him, her heart aching. Benjamin, I cannot take your savings. That is everything you have. You are everything I have, Benjamin said simply. What good is money if I lose you? If we lose this place, tears filled Maggie's eyes. That still would not be enough. We would still be short. Then we will find another way, Benjamin insisted, but even he sounded less certain now. That night, Maggie lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through impossible options. She could not take Benjamin's money, could not let him sacrifice everything for her. But neither could she bear the thought of losing the ranch, losing the future they had begun to build together. She prayed as she had not prayed since her parents died, asking for guidance, for a miracle, for any way out of this impossible situation. The next morning, a rider came up the road, a young man Maggie recognized as working for the feed store in town. He handed her an envelope with her name on it, written in an elegant hand she did not recognize. "A gentleman asked me to deliver this to you," the young man said. He said it was urgent. Maggie opened the envelope with shaking hands and pulled out a single sheet of paper. As she read, her eyes widened and she felt her knees go weak. Benjamin, who had come out of the barn at the sound of the horse, rushed to steady her. "What is it? What is wrong?" he demanded. "It is from a lawyer in Seattle," Maggie said, her voice shaking. "He says my father's cousin, a man named Samuel Turner, died 2 months ago in San Francisco. He left money to any surviving relatives of his uncle, who was my grandfather. Benjamin, he left me $500. The lawyer says he was trying to locate me to give me the inheritance, but my father died before he could complete his search." Benjamin stared at her, then let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around. "We can save the ranch. Maggie, we can save it." Maggie laughed and cried at the same time, clinging to Benjamin as he spun her. When he finally set her down, she kissed him with all the joy and relief flooding through her. "We did it," she said against his lips. "We actually did it." "You did it," Benjamin corrected. "You fought for this place, refused to give up. This is your victory, Maggie." "Our victory," Maggie insisted. "I could not have done any of it without you." They rode to town that very day and paid off the bank in full, with enough left over to buy breeding stock and see them through the winter. The look on Henderson's face when Maggie counted out the money in front of him was something she would treasure forever. Benjamin stood beside her the whole time, his hand on the small of her back, solid and supportive and unmistakably proprietary. As they walked out of the bank together, Benjamin stopped her on the wooden sidewalk. "Maggie, there is something I need to ask you, and I do not want to wait any longer." He dropped to one knee right there in the middle of town, pulling a simple gold band from his pocket. "This was my grandmother's ring. It is not much, but it is all I have to offer you besides my heart and my promise to spend every day of the rest of my life making you happy. Maggie Turner, will you marry me?" Maggie's eyes filled with tears, but these were tears of joy, so different from the ones Benjamin had washed away at the well all those weeks ago. "Yes," she said, her voice ringing clear and strong. "Yes, Benjamin Wallace, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he stood and kissed her, right there in front of the general store and the saloon and anyone who cared to watch, and Maggie kissed him back with all the love in her heart. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Centralia, with half the town in attendance. Maggie wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, and carried wildflowers that Benjamin had picked himself that morning. The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and when Benjamin kissed her, Maggie felt like the luckiest woman in the world. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food provided by neighbors who had known Maggie all her life. There was music and dancing, and when Benjamin led Maggie out for their first dance as husband and wife, she felt like she was floating. He held her close and whispered in her ear, "I love you, Maggie Wallace. I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too," Maggie whispered back. "Thank you for stopping at the well that day. Thank you for staying." "I would not be anywhere else," Benjamin said, and she knew he meant it. That night they climbed the stairs to the bedroom that had been Maggie's alone, now transformed with new curtains and fresh paint into their shared space. Benjamin carried her over the threshold, making her laugh, and set her down gently. They came together with tenderness and passion, discovering each other, binding themselves together in the most intimate way possible. Afterwards, Maggie lay in Benjamin's arms, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I used to think I would spend my life alone," she said quietly. "After my parents died, I could not imagine sharing this place with anyone, could not imagine trusting someone enough to let them in. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I had not even known I was praying." Benjamin's arms tightened around her. "I was so lost before I found you," he said. "I thought the best parts of my life were behind me, that all I had left was drifting from place to place, never belonging anywhere. But this ranch, it feels like home. You feel like home." "This is your home now," Maggie said firmly. "Ours. For as long as we both shall live." "And beyond," Benjamin murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the windows open to let in the cool night breeze, the sounds of the ranch settling around them like a lullaby. The first year of their marriage was hard work, but deeply happy. They expanded the herd, buying good breeding stock with the money left from Maggie's inheritance and the profits from their fall cattle sale. Benjamin proved to be not just a good cowhand but a shrewd businessman, negotiating fair prices and making contacts with buyers in Seattle and Portland. Maggie managed the books and the household with the same competence she brought to ranch work, and together they made the Turner Ranch, now the Wallace Ranch, more prosperous than it had been in years. In the spring of 1883, Maggie discovered she was pregnant. She told Benjamin one evening after supper, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a moment he just stared at her, and then joy broke across his features like the sunrise. "A baby," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "We are going to have a baby." "In November, the doctor thinks," Maggie confirmed, and found herself swept into another one of Benjamin's crushing hugs. "I am going to be a father," Benjamin said, sounding dazed. "Maggie, I promise you, I will be the best father I can be. I will never let anything happen to our child." "I know you will," Maggie said, touching his face. "You are going to be wonderful." Benjamin insisted on doing most of the heavy work around the ranch after that, trying to keep Maggie from overexerting herself. She protested that she was pregnant, not made of glass, but secretly she was touched by his protectiveness. He talked to her belly every night, telling their unborn child stories about the ranch and the mountains, about his family and hers, building a bridge of words between them and the new life growing inside her. When the leaves were turning gold in November and the air had the sharp bite of coming winter, Maggie went into labor. Benjamin rode for the doctor and for Mrs. Henderson, the minister's wife who served as midwife, and then paced the kitchen floor for 14 hours while Maggie labored upstairs. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy boy with a strong set of lungs, Benjamin burst into tears at his first sight of his son. "He is perfect," Benjamin said, holding the baby with infinite care, his big hands gentle and sure. "Maggie, he is absolutely perfect." "He has your eyes," Maggie said, exhausted but elated, watching her husband cradle their child. "What should we name him?" "Thomas," Benjamin said immediately, then looked at Maggie with uncertainty. "If that is all right with you, I would like to name him after my brother." "Thomas Wallace," Maggie said, trying it out. "It is a good, strong name." "Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world." They called him Tommy, and he became the center of their universe. Benjamin was a devoted father, getting up for night feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just watching his son sleep. Maggie had never seen anything more beautiful than the sight of her husband with their child, the fierce love and protectiveness in every line of his body. The ranch continued to prosper. By the time Tommy was 2 years old, they had one of the best herds in the territory, and their reputation for quality cattle had spread. Benjamin hired 2 hands to help with the work, good men who respected Maggie and treated her as an equal partner in the ranch, following Benjamin's example. In the summer of 1885, Maggie gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Martha after Maggie's mother. She had dark hair like her mother and her father's calm temperament, and Tommy was immediately smitten with his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. "We are blessed," Benjamin said one evening, holding Martha while Tommy sat on his lap, all of them squeezed into the rocking chair on the porch. "More blessed than I ever imagined I could be." "We are," Maggie agreed, sitting on the porch step at his feet, her head leaning against his knee. She looked out at the ranch, at the well-maintained fences and healthy cattle, at the garden she had expanded, at the new barn they had built last year. This place that had nearly been lost was now thriving, a testament to hard work and love and sheer determination. "You remember the day we met?" Benjamin asked, his voice soft so as not to disturb the children. "You were crying at the well, and I drew water to wash away your tears." "I remember," Maggie said. "I thought my life was over, that I had lost everything. I could not see any path forward. And now look at us," Benjamin said. "A family, a home, a future, all because I stopped to help a woman in distress." "All because you had a kind heart," Maggie corrected. "You could have ridden past, most men would have, but you stopped and you helped and you stayed." "I stayed because I fell in love with you," Benjamin said. "From that very first day, I think I knew you were going to change my life. I just did not know how completely, how wonderfully." Tommy, half asleep, stirred in his father's lap. "Tell the story," he mumbled. "Tell how you met Mama." Benjamin and Maggie exchanged a smile. They had told the story many times already, and it was becoming one of Tommy's favorite bedtime tales. "Well," Benjamin began, settling more comfortably in the chair. "It was a hot summer day in 1882, and I was riding through Centralia, Washington Territory, looking for work. I saw a beautiful woman crying at an old stone well, and I knew I had to help her." Maggie listened to her husband's voice weave the story of their meeting, embellishing it slightly for dramatic effect, making Tommy giggle at the parts about the stubborn cattle and gasp at the moment Maggie fell from her horse. She thought about how that single day had changed everything, how one act of kindness had blossomed into this life they had built together. As the sun set and the stars began to appear, Benjamin finished the story. "And they lived happily ever after," he concluded, using the words Tommy always wanted to hear. "Are we living happily ever after?" Tommy asked, his eyes half closed. "We are, son," Benjamin said, looking at Maggie with such love that it made her heart ache in the best possible way. "We absolutely are." The years passed in a steady rhythm of seasons and growth. Tommy grew tall and strong, learning ranch work from both his parents, developing his father's quiet competence and his mother's determination. Martha was a whirlwind of energy, keeping everyone on their toes, equally comfortable in a dress at church or in overalls helping her mother in the garden. In 1888, Maggie gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Jacob, who had his mother's dark eyes and a temperament as sunny as a summer day. The ranch grew with the family. Benjamin and Maggie became respected members of the community, known for their fair dealing and their willingness to help neighbors in need, just as Benjamin had once helped Maggie. They hired more hands as the herd expanded, built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, and became prosperous without ever forgetting the hard times that had brought them together. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1893, Benjamin took Maggie back to the well where they had first met. The children were staying with neighbors for the night, giving them a rare evening alone. The well looked the same as it had that day so long ago, the stone worn smooth by countless hands, the wooden handle weathered but still strong. I wanted to come back here, Benjamin said, standing with Maggie at the well's edge, his arm around her waist. To the place where everything began. To thank you for that day, for every day since. I should be thanking you, Maggie said. You saved me, Benjamin. You saved this place, gave me a life I never could have imagined. We saved each other, Benjamin said. That is what love does, I think. It takes two people who are lost or broken or alone, and it makes them whole together. He drew water from the well, just as he had that first day, and dipped his bandana in it. Gently, tenderly, he wiped Maggie's face with the cool water, echoing that first gesture of kindness. Maggie closed her eyes and felt tears slip down her cheeks, but these were tears of joy, of gratitude for the life they had built, the love they shared. I love you, Maggie Wallace, Benjamin said, his voice thick with emotion. I have loved you for 10 years, and I will love you for 10,000 more if the Lord grants us the time. I love you too, Maggie whispered, opening her eyes to look at the man who had become her whole world. Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for seeing me, for caring, for staying. Always, Benjamin promised, and kissed her there by the well in the place where their story had begun. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars come out over the ranch that was their home, their legacy, their future. The well that had witnessed Maggie's tears and Benjamin's kindness now stood testament to what they had built together, drawing from deep sources, just as the well drew water from deep in the earth. When they finally walked back to the house, hand in hand, Maggie thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. She had stood at this well in her darkest hour, certain she had lost everything, unable to see how she could go on. And then Benjamin had appeared, a stranger with kind eyes and gentle hands, and had literally washed away her tears with water from that same well. From that single moment of compassion had grown this entire life, these children, this love that sustained her more surely than water ever could. What are you thinking about? Benjamin asked, squeezing her hand. How lucky I am, Maggie said. How blessed we are, how grateful I am that you stopped that day. It was not luck, Benjamin said. It was fate, providence, whatever you want to call it. We were meant to find each other, Maggie. I believe that with everything in me. So do I, Maggie agreed, and knew it was true. As the 1890s progressed, the Wallace family became a fixture in Centralia and the surrounding territory. Tommy, now a young man, worked the ranch alongside his father, learning everything Benjamin could teach him. He had inherited his father's love of the land and his mother's head for business, and Benjamin often said proudly that the ranch would be in good hands when it came time to pass it on. Martha, spirited and bright, attended the school in town and showed a talent for teaching. She talked about becoming a school teacher herself someday, and Maggie supported her ambitions even as she taught her daughter the practical skills she would need as well. Jacob, the youngest, was equally comfortable with a rope or a book, curious about everything, full of questions that Benjamin patiently answered. In 1897, when Tommy was 14 and beginning to notice girls at the town socials, Benjamin took him aside for a talk about respect and love and treating women right. Your mother, Benjamin told his son, is the strongest, bravest, most wonderful woman I have ever known. I want you to find someone like her someday, someone who is your equal and your partner. And I want you to treat her the way I have tried to treat your mother, with respect and love and honor every single day. Tommy, who adored his mother and respected his father, took these words to heart. He watched how his parents interacted, the way his father still brought his mother wildflowers, the way they still stole kisses in the kitchen when they thought no one was looking, the way they made decisions together and supported each other through everything. It was a model of marriage he would carry with him his entire life. The ranch continued to prosper into the new century. When Washington became a state in 1889, Benjamin had joked that they had been there through the transition, pioneers in their own way. The railroad had come through, bringing more settlers and more markets for their cattle. The little territory town of Centralia was growing into a proper city, but the Wallace Ranch remained, anchored by the stone well and the love that had started there. In 1900, when Martha was 15 and Jacob was 12, Maggie discovered she was pregnant again, much to everyone's surprise. She was 39 years old and had not expected to have more children. Benjamin was simultaneously thrilled and terrified, worried about Maggie's health. But the local doctor assured them that while she needed to be careful, there was no reason to think she could not deliver safely. Their fourth child, a girl they named Eleanor, was born in the spring of 1901, healthy and perfect. Tommy, now 17 and nearly a man, was surprisingly gentle with his baby sister, and Martha delighted in having another girl in the family. Jacob, meanwhile, took his role as big brother very seriously, appointing himself Eleanor's protector. 4 children, Benjamin said wonderingly one night, holding Eleanor while the other children slept. When I met you, I never imagined all this. I never imagined being this happy. Neither did I, Maggie admitted, watching her husband with their youngest daughter. She was tired, her body not bouncing back from childbirth as quickly as it had when she was younger, but she was content in a way that went bone deep. But I am so grateful for every bit of it. For you, for our children, for this life we have built. The ranch is paid off, the herd is strong, and our children are healthy and happy, Benjamin said. We have achieved everything we set out to do, Maggie. Everything we fought for that first summer when we did not know if we could save this place. We did more than save it, Maggie said. We made it thrive. We made it a home, a legacy for our children and their children after them. As Eleanor grew, the family dynamic shifted again. Tommy began courting a girl from town, a sweet young woman named Sarah who shared his love of ranching. Benjamin and Maggie approved, seeing in Sarah the same qualities of strength and kindness that had drawn them to each other. Tommy married Sarah in 1903, and they moved into a house Benjamin and Maggie built for them on the ranch property, keeping the family close while giving the young couple their independence. Martha, true to her ambitions, went to the normal school in Olympia to train as a teacher. She came home during summers and holidays, full of stories about her studies and her plans for the future. Benjamin missed her terribly when she was gone, but he was proud of her independence and determination. Jacob, showing an aptitude for working with horses, took over the horse breeding operation Benjamin had started, developing a line of sturdy, reliable ranch horses that became sought after throughout the region. By the time he was 20, he had made a name for himself, and Benjamin beamed with pride at his son's accomplishments. Eleanor, the surprise baby, grew up surrounded by love from her parents and older siblings. She was a bright, curious child, always asking questions, always wanting to know how things worked. Maggie saw herself in Eleanor's independence and Benjamin's gentleness in the way she treated animals, and knew their youngest would forge her own unique path in time. In 1908, on their 25th wedding anniversary, the family threw a huge celebration at the ranch. Half of Centralia turned out, along with business associates from Seattle and Portland, neighbors from surrounding ranches, and family members from both sides. There was food and music and dancing, and speeches honoring Benjamin and Maggie's partnership and the legacy they had built. When it came time for the couple to say a few words, Benjamin stood with Maggie's hand in his, looking out at the assembled crowd. 25 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the yard, I was a drifter, a man with no home and no hope, running from a past I could not change. I stopped at a well to water my horse and found a woman crying. I could have ridden on. It would have been easier, probably. But something made me stop, made me help, and that single decision changed my entire life. He turned to look at Maggie, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Maggie, you have given me everything. A home, a family, a purpose, a love that has sustained me through every challenge. You have made me a better man than I ever thought I could be. These 25 years have been the greatest gift of my life, and I thank God every day that I stopped at that well. Maggie was crying openly now, not bothering to hide her tears. She stood and embraced her husband, and the crowd erupted in applause and cheers. When they finally pulled apart, Maggie took her turn to speak. "Ben Wallace came into my life when I was at my lowest point," she said, her voice strong despite the tears. "I had lost my parents, was about to lose my home, and I did not see how I could go on. He drew water from the well and washed away my tears, and in doing so, he washed away my despair and gave me hope. He gave me his strength when I had none left, his love when I thought I would never love again, and a partnership that has been the foundation of everything good in my life. I love you, Benjamin, more today than I did on our wedding day, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." They kissed then, amid the applause and the celebration, and it was exactly like that first kiss in front of the bank all those years ago, full of promise and passion and perfect rightness. The party went on late into the night, but eventually the guests departed, and the family retired to their respective homes on the property. Benjamin and Maggie walked together to the stone well, as they had done on every anniversary, and stood in the moonlight, remembering. 25 years, Maggie said softly. "How did it go by so fast?" "I do not know," Benjamin said, "but I would not trade a single day of it. Well, maybe the day that old bull chased me across the pasture, but otherwise not a single day." Maggie laughed, remembering. "You were so dignified, running and shouting." "I was strategically retreating," Benjamin protested, making her laugh harder. They stood there, comfortable in each other's presence as only people who have shared a life can be, and Benjamin drew water from the well one more time. He wet his bandana and gently washed Maggie's face, just as he had done on their first meeting and on every anniversary since. "Still washing away my tears," Maggie said softly, though she was smiling. "These are happy tears," Benjamin said, "the best kind." "Every tear I have cried with you has been worth it," Maggie said. "The sad ones, the happy ones, the frustrated ones when the cattle got out or the barn roof leaked, all of it, because I was crying them with you beside me." "We have built a good life," Benjamin said, looking around at the ranch, at the house where their children slept, at the land they had fought so hard to keep, and had turned into something prosperous and lasting. "A very good life." "The best," Maggie agreed. As they stood there by the well, the moonlight silvering the water and the grass, a figure approached from the main house. It was Alina, now 7 years old, unable to sleep with all the excitement. "Mama, Papa," she called softly. "What are you doing?" "Come here, sweetheart," Maggie said, and Alina ran to them. Benjamin scooped her up, settling her on his hip even though she was getting almost too big for it. "We were just remembering the day we met," Benjamin told his daughter, "right here at this well." "Tell me the story," Alina requested, and Maggie and Benjamin exchanged a smile. "Well," Benjamin began, sitting on the edge of the well with Alina in his lap, Maggie beside him. "It was a hot summer day in 1882, and I was riding through Centralia, looking for work." As Benjamin told the story, with Maggie adding details here and there, Alina listened with rapt attention, though she had heard it many times before. It was the story of their family's beginning, the foundation of everything they had become, and it never got old. When the story was finished, Alina looked up at her parents with serious eyes. "I want to find love like you did someday," she said. "You will," Maggie assured her, smoothing her daughter's hair. "When the time is right, you will find someone who sees you for who you really are, who values you and respects you and loves you with their whole heart. Just like your father found me. And you found me," Benjamin added. "It works both ways, Alina. Love is not about one person saving another. It is about two people choosing to face life together, to build something together, to be partners in every sense of the word." Alina nodded solemnly, taking in this wisdom, and Maggie felt a surge of love for her husband so strong it almost hurt. After all these years, he was still teaching, still nurturing, still being the kind of man who stopped to help a crying woman at a well. They walked back to the house together, the three of them, and Benjamin carried Alina upstairs to tuck her back into bed. Maggie stood in the doorway, watching him kiss their daughter's forehead, pull the blankets up to her chin, and whisper something that made Alina giggle. It was such a simple, domestic scene, but it filled Maggie with a contentment that was almost overwhelming. Later, in their own bedroom, Benjamin and Maggie prepared for bed with the comfortable routine of long marriage. Benjamin hung up his coat while Maggie unpinned her hair, and they moved around each other with practiced ease. "You remember how nervous we were on our wedding night?" Maggie asked, catching Benjamin's eye in the mirror. "Terrified," Benjamin admitted. "I had no idea what I was doing." "Neither did I," Maggie said, laughing. "But we figured it out together." "Just like everything else," Benjamin said, coming to stand behind her, his hands on her shoulders. He met her eyes in the mirror. "We have always figured things out together, Maggie. That is our secret, I think. Not giving up on each other, not giving up on us." "Never," Maggie agreed, leaning back against him. "I will never give up on us, Benjamin, not until the day I die." "And probably not even then," Benjamin said, making her laugh. "I imagine you haunting me, making sure I do not make a mess of things." "You would not make a mess of things," Maggie said seriously. "You are the most capable man I know." "But yes, I probably would haunt you, just to make sure you were eating properly and not working yourself too hard." They climbed into bed, and Benjamin pulled Maggie close, her head on his shoulder, their bodies fitting together as perfectly as they had for 25 years. Outside, the ranch was quiet, the cattle settled, the horses drowsy in their stalls, the world peaceful and right. "Thank you for stopping at the well," Maggie whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for washing away my tears." "Thank you for letting me," Benjamin whispered back. "Thank you for giving me a reason to stay, a reason to live, a reason to believe in love again. You are my whole world, Maggie Wallace." "And you are mine," Maggie said, and they drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms the way they had for 25 years and would for many more to come. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but always undergirded by the solid foundation of Benjamin and Maggie's love. Tommy and Sarah gave them their first grandchildren, twin boys in 1904, followed by a daughter in 1906. Benjamin was a doting grandfather, teaching his grandsons to ride almost before they could walk, telling them stories of the old days, passing on the legacy just as it had been passed to him. Martha married a fellow teacher in 1909, a kind, thoughtful man named Robert who understood her passion for education and supported her dreams. They settled in Olympia, where Martha opened her own school, but they visited the ranch often, and their children grew up knowing their grandparents' love. Jacob married in 1911, a woman named Catherine, who shared his love of horses and ranch life. They built their home on the Wallace property, continuing the tradition of keeping the family close, and their children grew up riding the horses Jacob bred, learning the same lessons of hard work and integrity that Benjamin had instilled in his own children. Alina, the baby, grew into a bright, independent young woman with her own dreams and ambitions. She wanted to study medicine, an unusual goal for a woman in 1915, but Benjamin and Maggie supported her completely, having learned long ago that trying to constrain Alina's spirit was both impossible and wrong. Through it all, Benjamin and Maggie remained the center of the family, the anchor around which everyone else orbited. They were in their 60s now, slowing down somewhat but still active in the running of the ranch. Benjamin's hair had gone silver, and Maggie's hands showed the effects of decades of hard work, but their love had not dimmed. If anything, it had deepened, matured like fine wine, becoming something rich and unshakable. They still walked to the well every evening when weather permitted, standing together in the place where their story had begun, drawing water and remembering. It had become a ritual, a meditation, a way of honoring what they had built together. The well itself had been maintained and improved over the years, but the stone foundation remained the same, worn smooth by countless hands, including theirs. In 1918, when the country was in the grip of the Great War, and then the terrible influenza pandemic, the Wallace family weathered the storms as they always had, together. They lost neighbors and friends to both the war and the disease, but the family itself remained intact, protected perhaps by their isolation on the ranch and their strong constitutions. Through those dark times, Benjamin and Maggie's example of steadfastness and love gave strength to their children and grandchildren. They showed that even in the darkest hours, love persisted. That commitment meant staying together through everything, that a partnership built on respect and genuine affection could withstand any trial. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1923, the family gathered once more at the ranch for a celebration. Benjamin was 67 now, Maggie 63, and they had 14 grandchildren ranging from infants to late teens, with one great-grandchild on the way. The house they had expanded over the years was filled with noise and laughter. 3 generations of Wallaces and those who had married into the family, all united by the love of 2 people who had met at a well 40 years earlier. The party was smaller than the 25th anniversary celebration had been, more intimate, focused on family rather than the wider community. After dinner, Benjamin rose and took Maggie's hand, leading her outside to the well as everyone followed. 40 years ago today, Benjamin said, his voice still strong despite his age, I married the love of my life. I stood in a church in this town and promised to love her for better or worse in sickness and health until death parted us. I have kept that promise every single day since, and I will keep it until the Lord calls me home. Maggie, you have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. You have given me children and grandchildren, a home and a purpose, and a love that has never wavered. I am the luckiest man who ever lived. He drew water from the well, just as he had done on their first meeting, on their wedding day, on every anniversary. He wet his bandana and gently washed Maggie's face, and she smiled at him with such love that several of their grandchildren gasped at the beauty of it. Benjamin Wallace, Maggie said, her voice still clear and strong, you stopped at this well when I needed you most. You washed away my tears and gave me hope. You stood beside me and helped me save this ranch, and then you stayed and helped me build a life here, a family here. You have been my partner, my best friend, my love for 40 years, and I thank God for every single day we have had together. I love you more now than I ever have, and I will love you forever. They kissed, and their children and grandchildren applauded, many of them crying at the simple, profound demonstration of enduring love. Tommy, now a man of 40 with silver threading his hair, stood with his arm around Sarah, thinking of how his parents had set the example he had followed in his own marriage. Martha, wiping her eyes, squeezed Robert's hand, grateful for the model of partnership she had seen all her life. Jacob and Catherine exchanged a look of perfect understanding, their own marriage built on the same foundation of respect and love. And Alina, now studying medicine in Seattle but home for the anniversary, felt her heart swell with gratitude for parents who had shown her what real love looked like. The celebration continued into the evening, but eventually Benjamin and Maggie found themselves alone at the well once more, the moon rising over the mountains, the ranch quiet around them. They sat on the edge of the well, Maggie leaning against Benjamin's shoulder, both of them tired but content. 40 years, Maggie said softly. It seems impossible. I feel like that girl of 22 is still inside me somewhere, terrified and desperate, not knowing how to go on. She is inside you, Benjamin said, kissing the top of her head. Along with the strong woman who fought to save this place, the wife who has stood beside me through everything, the mother who raised 4 incredible children, and the grandmother who spoils her grandchildren rotten. You are all of those people, Maggie, and I love every version of you. And you are still the kind man who stopped to help a stranger, Maggie said. You could have kept riding, Benjamin. Your whole life would have been different. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not stopped? Never, Benjamin said firmly. I do not waste time on what-ifs. I stopped because I could not do otherwise, because something in me recognized something in you, because we were meant to find each other. I believe that with everything in me. This was always supposed to be our story, Maggie. You and me and this ranch and our family. All of it was meant to be. I believe that too, Maggie said, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out, holding each other the way they had for 40 years. The 1920s brought more changes. The country was booming, and the ranch prospered along with it. Tommy took over more of the day-to-day management, as Benjamin's arthritis made it harder for him to do the heavy physical labor. But Benjamin remained involved in all major decisions. He had raised his children to value his input without being dependent on it, to think for themselves while respecting the wisdom of experience. Maggie, too, slowed down somewhat, but she remained the heart of the family. Her kitchen was still the gathering place for Sunday dinners, her counsel still sought by children and grandchildren alike, her love still the force that held everyone together. She had become the matriarch in the best sense of the word, not domineering but nurturing, not controlling but guiding. In 1928, on a warm summer evening very much like the one when they had first met, Benjamin and Maggie sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. Benjamin's health had been declining, his heart not as strong as it once was, but he refused to give in to it, refused to let it stop him from enjoying the life he and Maggie had built. I have been thinking, he said to Maggie, taking her hand, about what happens after. About what you will do when I am gone. Benjamin, do not talk like that, Maggie protested, even though they both knew the conversation was necessary. We have to, love, Benjamin said gently. We are not young anymore and we need to be practical. I want you to know that I have arranged everything. The ranch will go to Tommy, but there are provisions for all the children. You will never want for anything, Maggie. I have made sure of that. And I want you to know that when I die, I will die a happy man, knowing I lived a full and wonderful life with you. Maggie's eyes filled with tears. I do not want to think about losing you, she said. I cannot imagine this life without you in it. You will not have to imagine it for a long time yet, Benjamin said with a smile. I am not planning on going anywhere soon. I have too many great-grandchildren to spoil, too many sunsets to watch with you. But when the time comes, I want you to know that I regret nothing. Every moment with you has been a gift, Maggie. Every single moment." "I love you so much," Maggie whispered, and Benjamin pulled her close, holding her the way he had held her 1,000 times before, with strength and tenderness and infinite love. Benjamin lived for 3 more years, 3 good years filled with family and laughter, and the simple joys of ranch life. He died peacefully in his sleep in October of 1931, with Maggie beside him, having lived to see his 75th birthday. The family mourned him deeply, but they also celebrated a life well lived, a legacy of love and integrity that would endure for generations. Maggie, now 71, grieved as she had never grieved before, even for her parents. Benjamin had been her partner for 48 years, her whole adult life, and the world seemed impossibly empty without him. But she found solace in their children and grandchildren, in the ranch they had built together, in the memories of a love that had sustained her through everything. She lived for 17 more years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1948 at the age of 88, surrounded by family. In her final days, she spoke often of Benjamin, of the day they met at the well, of the life they had built together. Her last words were, "He is waiting for me," and she smiled as she said them, as if she could already see him. They buried Maggie beside Benjamin on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the stone well where their story had begun. The headstone reads simply, "Benjamin Wallace, 1856–1931, and Margaret Wallace, 1860–1948. They met at a well and built a lifetime." The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the foundation that Benjamin and Maggie had laid. The stone well remained, carefully maintained by the family, a monument to where it all began, to a cowboy who stopped to help a woman in distress and found the love of his life. Decades later, great-great-grandchildren would play near the well, and their parents would tell them the story of Benjamin and Maggie, of how he drew water and washed away her tears, of how that single act of kindness became the foundation of everything they were. The story became a family legend, passed down with pride, a reminder of what real love looked like, of the power of compassion and commitment, of 2 people choosing each other every single day for 48 years. The well still draws water, cold and pure from deep in the earth, just as it did on that summer day in 1882, when Benjamin Wallace stopped to help a crying woman and changed both their lives forever. And if you stand there on a quiet evening, with the sun setting and the breeze whispering through the grass, you can almost hear the echoes of their love, feel the presence of the partnership they built, understand the truth they lived. That love is not just a feeling but a choice, a commitment, a daily decision to stand beside someone through everything life brings. Their story did not end with death. It continued in the ranch they saved and built together, in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried forward their values, in the well that remained as testimony to where a love story began. Benjamin and Maggie Wallace built something that lasted, something real and true and beautiful. And it started with water drawn from a well and tears washed away by gentle hands. In the end, that is what endures, not grand gestures or dramatic moments, but simple acts of kindness that blossom into lifetimes of love. A cowboy saw her crying at the well. He drew water and washed away her tears, and from that moment, everything changed. They lived happily ever after together.